we are going to invite our fellow panelists, to speak on Technos pioneering the future of private networks. With us, we have Mr. Manish Tiwari, Head of Private Networks, Ericsson. He brings a wealth of experience in strategy and development of implementing private cellular networks. We would request Mr. Manish to be on stage, please. The next panelist we have is Mr. Alok Shukla. He is the Senior Vice President for Data Products and Business Solutions in Airtel Business. We have Mr. Manish Gange. He is the Executive President of Product Strategy in HFCL. We have Mr. Gulshan Khurana, Executive Vice President at Vodafone India Limited. Mr. Ricky Matai, a Director at VVDN Technologies, focusing on 5G and private networks. And we have Mr. Jayant Moge, Pegatron, AVP and Country Manager for Pegatron Communication and Products. So firstly, thank you all the panelists for being here. We heard a lot on day one that we are the breeding ground of innovation. A lot of investments, a lot of partnerships, ecosystem is being developed for AI and for setting up the emerging technologies in India. Now, if we look at the Technos part, how we are building the private networks, so maybe a question to you, Mr. Manish, how do you see the future trends are shaping up in India? And how are different sectors, and how do you see different sectors preparing themselves to take advantage of the private networks?
Sure. Thank you, Yogesh, and thank you for having me on the panel. It's great to be here. I'm based out of San Francisco, and I'm responsible for the global private networks and neutral host business inside Ericsson. To your question about how are industries evaluating this technology and how are they benefiting from it, I will start by saying that from an enterprise perspective, from an industry perspective, a wireless networking technology is not new to them, right? They have been on Wi-Fi for a number of years. I think what is new is a number of industries, after having deployed networks on Wi-Fi, have come to a conclusion that there are use cases and there are use cases that just don't work on unlicensed spectrum on a best effort kind of a technology. So what we see happening is that when these verticals come to that conclusion, we start seeing a pretty rapid scale of customers adopting private 5G for primarily 3 or 4 reasons. One of them is coverage, of course, right? Having good quality coverage is really important for environments which have high ceilings. It's a warehouse or a factory or a oil and gas field and things like that. So coverage is very important. The second reason is mobility. So once you have, in manufacturing, for example, when you have a lot of AGVs and AMRs and things moving around, and that requires mobility and deterministic mobility, and private 5G and private networks work very well in those kind of environments. The third reason is latency. So what we start seeing is when you get to low latency applications with wireless IoT applications, there is a need to have latency as low as 20 milliseconds, 15 milliseconds, and this will continue to go lower and lower. And private 5G works really well in those kind of use cases compared to any other technology out there. And then security, right? Security is very important for a number of verticals. Mining, oil and gas, these are critical infrastructure verticals where security is really important, and the inherent security characteristics of cellular help a lot with the deployments and with the enterprise becoming comfortable with the security aspect of it. And then the last one is capacity. So what we see is there are use cases where there is a need for a deterministic high bandwidth uplink, video, augmented reality, connected worker, digital twin, things like that, where private 5G works very well compared to other technologies out there. So these are the reasons why people adopt it, and then they benefit from it.
Maybe just a curious follow-up, Mr. Manish, how do you see the uptake is happening? Because if we compare India versus the Western worlds, I think we still look at the revenue maximization and ROI as an important aspect. Do you think it's picking up across the sectors?
Yeah, so it is picking up in some countries faster than others. The countries where it is picking up are those countries which are either manufacturing hubs or mining hubs or oil and gas hubs. There are hubs for these industries that have a pretty well-defined use case and a well-defined ROI. And what we hear from our perspective, we saw, let's say 3 years ago, there were a lot of POCs happening. 2 years ago, people had started deploying this in, let's say, one large factory or one oil and gas field and one mine and things like that. Last year, we started the same people coming to a conclusion that there is clear ROI. In many cases, we heard that the whole investment in the network infrastructure got paid off in less than a year. And that's a consistent story we hear from many customers. And then this year, we started seeing several enterprises wanting to do global deployments across all of their facilities. So we're talking about large enterprises with 40, 50, 100 different countries of presence and them wanting to scale private 5G in all of these countries. So that's where we are in the market, but it is still a vertical specific sales motion. So certain industries scale faster than others.
Okay. Taking this forward to Mr. Alok. Alok, Manish just mentioned on the POCs that have been going on since couple of years, but there have been key considerations that enterprises have been looking for, whether to go for a public networks or the private networks. And from an operator standpoint, how do you see that trade-off is happening in terms of customization, in terms of implementations, and the security as well?
Sure. So I think Manish already covered that briefly. So it's entirely depend on what problem is the customer trying to solve, which use case is there. Some of the use case, because of the latency or the reliability or the coverage, have no other choice because you can't deploy a Wi-Fi in that scale. So I won't call it a trade-off. I would still say that it's a use case basis, which essentially, decides whether you go for a private network or a traditional network. So that's how I see it.
Okay, but in terms of always looking at to select between a private or a public technologies, are the private networks still catching up with the capacity needs or the deployment easeability of as compared to the public networks?
Oh, absolutely. I think the private network usually is spoken and seen in the larger arena of the digitization agenda for the enterprises. That's where it stacks in. It's not a standalone block in the whole puzzle. It's part of a larger digitization agenda that most enterprises are trying to drive, right? I think with private 5G, what is happening is in that journey, many new use cases are being unlocked, which were not possible in the traditional networks. And hence, there's a massive traction in different stages. It is yet to fructify into a foolproof solution. As I said, it's not a debate about private 5G. It's a larger decision, business case, ROI for the digitization agenda, and it's part of that puzzle. So, so I think the short answer is, yes, it is seeing a lot of traction in the larger piece of digitization that people are trying to drive. I don't think it is replaceable by the traditional networks because of some of the new use cases that we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. To Mr. Manish, see, we always look at that certain sectors, are getting a traction for building a 5G use cases, but still some sectors are lagging behind. Maybe in your view, what have you seen, how the market is moving? Are there any use cases, for a sectors that are still lagging and you see it is going to move very fast?
Look, as Alok was alluding to, right? The digital transformation is the key agenda, right, for the enterprise. Now, the use cases or the deployment of private 5G, in my view, is like you cannot have multiple networks running in an enterprise, right? Even though you have a need of a use case that is getting served by, say, for example, Wi-Fi. But then you have a very critical application where latency is key, where mobility or handoff is extremely important, right? You would like to deploy a private 5G network. The important thing is that you are able to manage all your infrastructure homogeneously, right? And that's where the organizations tend to go. Now that's a little bit bigger decision than just deploying a specific use case. And therefore, this evolution is slower compared to what we would have liked, right? But use case perspective, right? I mean, there are plenty of use cases, right? If you really just look at the automation as, one use case within an industry, within a manufacturing facility, you have this MRO capability, right? Preventive maintenance. This is something, if you can figure out when your machines are going to go down proactively, predictively, you can increase the productivity, right? I mean, that's a given, right? That productivity enhancement as well as the operational costs going down through the efficiencies that you gain, right? If you are able to prove that there is a use case within your environment which can actually start to give you the return through OPEX or through CAPEX, you should start to deploy, right? And then many cases, right? So automation is one. I see specifically, the factory setups or the industry setups where you have an indoor and outdoor deployment, right? Outdoor deployment sometimes like say ports, right? Or large setups where you need to have the vehicles moving or autonomous robots moving. There is very clear case of being able to go and deploy a private 5G network, right? And I think we will get there. The question that you had asked earlier, right, as to when this will start to make sense, right, will depend on how our fellow telcos start to play this out, right? Because the private 5G networks are deployable in three forms, the way I understand, right? One is what we call the public network, a slice on the public network, right? I mean, this is a big promise of the 5G, right? That you can slice the network in a way you can give a predictable, reliable, guaranteed bit rate, guaranteed latency on a public slice, right? There is also, a little bit of trade-off that is taking place, saying that you don't deploy a complete, slice, a public network slice, but do a hybrid. A little bit of the network sits inside, because wherever there is a data privacy, which is very important, there is a little bit of network that sits inside and a little bit network that sits onto the public side. And the third one is obviously completely, private, right? So I think the costing, the pricing, ROI will determine which one will get adopted and how we'll go forward from there.
Okay, thank you. Moving to Mr. Gulshan. Mr. Gulshan, fellow panelist, spoke on definitely there is a traction, there is an intent by the enterprises, but every enterprises have their specific nuances to tackle. So they are looking for the customized solutions, customized use cases. At the same time, sometimes it's challenging to deploy as well. How do you see, from an operator standpoint, that certain use cases still needs time to get implemented because those needs either a trade-off with the ROI or maybe the operational efficiency as we talk about?
So it looks like you were asking them why we should do private 5G. You're asking me why we should not do private 5G. So it's
a different perspective you want to hear.
But I like this. So we all talk in favor. Yes, it's required. There's no doubt about it. Why it is not picking up today with the momentum that we wanted it to pick up? Couple of very, very ground level realities I'll tell you. First is that out of the enterprises that come to us saying we need to launch a private 5G network, there's a cost associated. Now, a large enterprise which is having a turnover of 1,000 crore, 2,000 crore, 5,000 crore can afford to have a 20, 30, 40 crore rupee network which can be deployed as per the use cases as you mentioned, and they can use it as per their requirement. What about a small enterprise with a turnover of 50 crores, for example? How can we support them? They have a requirement, they have use cases, they are doing something that requires very low latency, they have very high throughput running in. A small company which does manufacturing, for example, on the quality control, they need to take thousands of pictures in 1 second on a last mile product and see whether it works well or not. These are high definition pictures or videos. They have to be consumed within the premise. They don't need to send the data back to the public network. How do they do it? Latency is required is very low, throughput is required is very high, but they cannot afford to have it. So I think one thing which comes very important from this discussion is that we should have a solution wherein agnostically I can serve multiple SMEs, multiple enterprises, giving a common private 5G solution. There are hubs where there are 20, 30 industries. Can I build a network that is consuming use cases from all of them while they don't spend cost on it? So that's one, I think, area that we need to together as an industry focus on. Second thing which comes to my mind is that these industries are specialized into production, for example. They make finished goods. They design things. They are not telco specialists. Once I deploy a private 5G in their premise, how are they going to manage this network? Right? They need specialists who are well versed with 5G. They know what modulation techniques are being used on radio. They know how ciphering is happening. They know how core is, using the packets to make decisions on control plane. So they don't have this wherewithal. So somehow all of they have to give the control plane back to the central cloud structure to a telco saying, you please manage it for me. So that's also one impediment for them, lack of competence in this regard. So one is ROI in the investment they do. Second is, they cannot have the buildup of competence to manage. This is not the core area of business. Third is that there are certain regulations also which are kind of, hindering the entire process. Today, our regulation says that legal interception is required for entire data consumed on a private network. Now, if there's a private captive consumption of data, why should I be worried about what internally to the company they're doing? Why should I intercept this? Now, today what happens is I have to bring back entire legal deception X1, X2 interfaces back to my core network saying, oh, I'll intercept these are the targets. If they are using a spectrum that is given by me, but it's being completely used it's like a enterprise PBX in your office. I don't need to come and see what you're talking to your employees, right? So I think these things need to be sorted out. And then spectrum issues are always there. And as Alok alluded to, and Manish also said, there's a discussion going on. First it was, can I use open public networks? Yeah. There are security issues, there are guarantee of service issue. Wi-Fi cannot give you that. Though Wi-Fi offered a free spectrum, Wi-Fi offered almost free devices. Every device comes in Wi-Fi built in, but it doesn't give you security, it doesn't give you required QCIs, doesn't give you required performance. So we have to jump in. The next stage came with slicing, for example. Do I build a slice with a telco or I build my own network? Will depend purely on your requirement. What kind of use case do you have? So I think these 3-4 cases, these are not technology challenges. These are not regulation challenges. These are challenges that the industry needs to work on together to build a conducive environment to have this 5G take up soon.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Ricky. Ricky, every year we talk about newer technologies. Maybe a few years back we were talking about 5G private networks. Then we started talking about expanding the 5G to the country. Now we're talking about AI. How do you see the convergence is happening? And in terms of the tech advancements which are happening, how do you see the evolution as well as the success of the private networks in India?
Okay. So 5G as a standalone, right? Okay, let me talk about the private enterprise solutions, right? So we already had some discussions. Wi-Fi 6 is coming, 5G is coming, which is better. See, based on the use cases which are available now, what we understand is the private 5G industry is going to grow by maybe 50% by 2030. And the main force that is driving here is the use case that is industry 4.0, where we have multiple technologies merging together with 5G to provide low latency. Okay, bandwidth, I'm not talking about bandwidth because Wi-Fi 6 is there for that. User density, where you have multiple IoT devices connected across the entire industry, premises where you are monitoring autonomous vehicles and a lot of analytics also which is going on, which cannot be possible by standalone 5G alone. I'm not talking NSA and SA, just standalone 5G alone, you have IoT coming up. So I am talking about the technologies now, IoT, right? IoT, a lot of IoT devices are required where we'll be having mass number of devices active in the field which should happen, take decisions real time. Now again, I came to decisions, AI. AI should come in, right? So we already have very vast examples and the panelists here may or may not have been involved directly into that. So it's all about collaborations and we have panelists here who have already worked on technologies, not in India, sorry, but outside, right? We have smart factories where, the production downtime has reduced to 44%. Why? Because they have used AI analytics and 5G, right? And we have hospital industries. So we are all talking about industries now, different sectors, different industries, hospitals, right? We have standards called HIPAA and all where, the doctors can remotely, monitor patients. IoT devices are multiple patients are there who are monitored by IoT devices. Then we have coal mines where you have security related concerns. By the way, 5G gives you a unique proposition where you have security involved because it's a SIM based authentication which is being used. So 5G as a standalone, you will get the latency, you will get the throughput. Yes, throughput is also there. You will get the throughput as per your Wi-Fi 6 technologies, and also you will support a lot of code density or device density. So as of now, these are the technologies which are running, and of course, it's always beneficial for the industry, and we need a use case in India which will support. And as an ODM, it's a very exciting moment. Why? Because it's a chance to integrate many technologies together, which will give a tailored solution to this enterprise.
Sure, thank you. Maybe over to Mr. Jayant. So Mr. Jayant, when we talk to the enterprises, they're still undergoing a phase of digital transformation. Now, for a large enterprises, it's still okay to spend maybe crores in deploying a use case and wait for an ROI. But for these smaller enterprises or a medium enterprises, it could still be a challenge. Maybe they're not aware of what are we trying to propose, or they don't see the ROI out of it. How do you tackle those challenges, and what would be your takeaways for the enterprises to look at?
Digital transformation is what's the key that is going to drive it. Private 5G is a solution to reach that. We talked about the different kinds of networks, and Gulshan talked about the challenges, when you have a small shop. One of the ways that network slicing is one way of doing private 5G. On-premises private 5G is another way of doing it, wherein you have edge computing, you have 5G, and at a given, depending on the size of the enterprise, you can bring in AI. At Pegatron, we have actually deployed this in our factory in Taiwan and in Indonesia, where 5G is the glue, and we have AI applications in our factories making communication products. The ROI definitely has to be taken into account. You need, as the late General Colin Powell said, you need an entry strategy, you need an exit strategy. And you need to see what are the low-hanging fruits if you have any, and you need to work through them. Start small. What are your goals? Does a initial POC, does it help you? Are you a greenfield? Are you a brownfield network? And then slowly expand and move forward. And for a lot of industries, on-premises makes a lot of sense because they want to have absolute control. They do not want their data to go out of the enterprise. And the other aspect is you need to be able to serve their use cases in private 5G as a wireless network. The first thing you need is spectrum. And a lot of the cases when you have AI and cameras, it's uplink heavy, not downlink. That has its own set of challenges as we see, in some other countries like here. So it'll have to be, you take a small use case, what will give you an ROI. You need to have, ensure that that is something that gives you the return on investment, or that is successful. The success criteria that the enterprise needs to, you need to do a co-education with them. Is it productivity? Is it efficiency? Is it revenue generation? And given we are a 3GPP technology, the security aspects all are definitely taken care of. But you need to do it in a step-by-step way. And whatever existing feature or existing solutions they have, if they have a Wi-Fi 6, how do you incorporate that? Because they're not going to throw away. You need to make sure that you bring all of that together and move forward.
Thank you. Maybe just to follow up, Mr. Jain, there's definitely, from an OEM side, from an operator side, we always see a value to it. But do you really think any two factors or any two areas where enterprises can think of, maybe just to get a sense of how private networks can be beneficial to them?
Yeah, so one is, see, when you have AI coming in, so in our factory, we have done what they call automatic optical inspection and SOP, standard operating procedure. So if a worker has come in new, he or she is not fully trained, there is an AI camera as they're putting in chips on the board, there is an order to it. If that order is not followed, it will be flagged and it will go into the SOP queue, where again it will be monitored by AI cameras that are they are they correcting the mistake in the right way, so that your turnaround time becomes very quick. AR VR was talked about, digital twin was talked about. I'm talking about smart manufacturing. With AR VR, new employees who come in, you can give them on-the-job training. If they have to replace a part in a machine, you can use AR VR to tell them how to do it. And with digital twin, you can actually, simulate what's happening on your factory floor. Or if you want to quickly change your product mix, you can simulate it and make the change. And we do have huge plans for digital twin, because we have factories globally, and have a digital twin in Taiwan, and then that can get connected into digital twins in all our factories. So that's our ultimate goal.
Okay, thank you. Maybe going back to Mr. Manish. So Manish, in your experience of looking at the markets across the geographies, we always look at India as a very special or a different kind of a market, because the majority of the market is prepaid for a retail side, and even for the commercial, which is the enterprises, they always think about the ROI. Again, I'm emphasizing on that, but at the same time, there are some constraints with respect to regulatory and security part, because when they deploy the equipments for the private networks, they see how would they manage, because they don't have specified CTIOs or the CIOs to look after that. How do you think we are going to suggest that problem and maybe a resolution to that?
Sure, and I will maybe touch upon a couple of things that was said by the fellow panelists. So first, I think as an industry, we in the telco industry tend to be very introverted, and we talk to each other, we build solutions for ourselves, and then we make assumptions that the rest of the world should simply adopt them. What we are learning with private 5G especially is that when we build these solutions, you have to focus on the enterprise buyer. And when you start focusing on the enterprise buyer, you discover new things. Why is it that the current model doesn't work as well? And we have customers who tell us that I have private 5G deployed, I have AGVs running on the factory floor. If an outage happens, I have 10 minutes to react. And in those 10 minutes, I need to troubleshoot the problem, debug the problem, fix the problem, because otherwise all kinds of bad things happen. The loss in production costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per minute. So that's the kind of environments we are operating in, and which means that this enterprise customer is not going to be able to call a telco or even call Ericsson to solve that problem. It has to be solved in the product itself. You have to provide visibility, troubleshooting, workflows for them to solve this problem on their own. And you're absolutely right that a lot of enterprises don't have the cellular expertise, which means that the product has to become simpler enough that they can solve this problem in a matter of minutes. Right? So that's the journey we are on. Listen to customers and simplify the product to make it suitable for their deployments and give them the control. And the issue of control was raised. This is an absolutely very important thing. We hear this consistently from almost every enterprise, that they want to be able to manage the network, control the network, troubleshoot the problems. They don't want to depend on other organizations to do that. So it's really important to make the products in a way that they can troubleshoot it themselves.
Sure. Take this forward to Mr. Alok. So Mr. Alok, how do you see could be the strategy mix enterprises or maybe from a telco side should adopt so that there's a mass adoption? Because what we have seen from last couple of years, it's restricted to maybe top 10 use cases, because others still need to have a better ROI to maybe realize over the period of time. In terms of a strategy, how do you tell the enterprises or maybe look at from your standpoint so that there's a adoption across the sectors and the use case also evolve?
Sure. So I think I'll give you one example, one conversation which I was having with a construction environment. The problem that they need to solve is how do their workers wearing helmets or any such security protocol, as simple as that, is 100% compliant because it results in accidents and death, right? That's the problem that they're trying to solve. Doesn't matter private, public, and stuff like that. So I think one, it needs to be elevated to a business. We talk about digitization and all of that, but it's literally that simple as that. If employee security, worker security is a priority, everything flows down there, right? And then you're not talking about a budget constraint for network, then it's a very different conversation. Second thing is, I think Manish alluded this too. I think this is an ecosystem play. Network is just a part of it, right? Somebody was alluding to some of the applications. How do you, flash this? How do you notify the relevant stakeholders? So there's an application play and the whole chain of it. So I think the second thing is a collaboration in the industry, or so-called, it's a little cliche word, but the ecosystem needs to come together. So I think these are the two biggest things which we feel can be influenced and pushed to make this really pick up pace.
Okay, sure. Maybe over to Mr. Manish again. So Manish, how do you see the ecosystem now in India? Because it's been 2-3 years. We've been talking about private networks. It's always, we have seen that startups are coming in, new app developments are happening. There's always talking about slicing and all. So do you think the ecosystem is now well positioned for the private networks to prosper?
I think if we're specifically talking about India, right, the biggest enablement that is needed for any private 5G kind of use cases to really take shape in the real sense, right? Beyond what we're talking about doing the demos and POCs and things like that, there has to be a spectrum that is available to the enterprise at the cost that makes sense, right? Because end of the day, if spectrum is being looked at in the same way like we do it for our mobility as the customer, which is like millions of the customer, I don't think that will generate the kind of uptake that is expected, right? So I think as an industry, right, we've been talking about this is an ecosystem play for that simple reason that spectrum is owned by telcos. They pay a whole lot of money to acquire that spectrum. And how do you make sure that spectrum becomes available at the right cost? So what business models that we need to have in place to be able to make it available, right? And this is a tough problem to solve. It's not an easy, if it was easy problem, it would have been solved already, right? So I think that is one enablement that we're looking at. There are many use cases that, that are very critical that are happening. Like in the mining sector in India, all the coal mines and everything, there are very, very, critical situations where worker safety, right, we talked about, are, not able to reach the mines, right, which are below the ground. And you do need a network being there and being very predictable, right, because it's a, matter of life and death. So there are some such, initiatives that are taking place, which are very, very crucial for us to go and kickstart this activity in India. Because these are, if we don't do it, we're basically, pushing the problem out. So, I mean, ecosystem has to come together. That will make sure, because we're seeing all the other countries, right? I mean, other countries, take Japan, take Korea, take China. I mean, China is a different reason also. Take France, take, Germany. These are industrial hubs. They had problem statements in front of them. They decided to solve it. They solved it. We need to do the same thing, right? We have a lot of problem statements that need to get solved. And it's just that we need to all come together, sit together, have a conversation along with the regulators and see how do we solve this.
Sure, thank you. Maybe Gulshan ji, a bit tricky question, when sometimes when we and Go interact with the enterprises, a lot of times they come, why are we talking about 5G? Why can't a use cases be implemented 4G? There are techniques like, or technologies like LoRa, Sigfox, Zigbee, Wi-Fi 6. why are we talking about 5G?
Absolutely. I think you have saved all tricky questions for me only. But a good point. Why can't we use 4G? I use 4G as a mobile hotspot at my home to watch HD content on a television. It works well. So why do I need 5G only? The television content which I watched is not prone to or not depending on the latency that I have. Couple of milliseconds doesn't matter for me at home, right? But you see, can you have a remote surgery being done and the doctor says I had a 2-second latency? Oops, I cut the wrong vein or artery or whatever. So first is latency absolutely important. And one of the panelists mentioned about the content not being shared from a private network to the public network. Very important. If I have, it's not from the cost perspective only, it's from security perspective. I have my content which is very closely guarded. It could be defense industry, it could be anything else. I do not want it to travel to a public network. So that's second point. Why I need 5G precisely for that. Third point is that, 5G gives so it's a kind of enabler. 5G gives you the possibility of creating content worth billions of gigabytes. 4G will not allow you to do that. And Jayant alluded to the uplink capacity as well. Now, if you have terabytes of data which is being consumed by the local enterprise, do you want this to travel all the way back to the cloud of a telco? No, you don't want. Transport is expensive. Laying down a fiber, putting an IP network on that is very expensive. So that's the case when a private 5G will be required. You could argue it could be edge as well. So edge has its own use cases. But edge is not a complete solution based out of a edge requirement on a remote area. On private 5G, consumption of the high amount of data locally within the premise while sending out the control signals back to the control plane of a telco. That's the key because I need to manage the network from a remote area. Now coming back to your question on why not 4G, content generation of 4G was not so high. I don't need, 5G is a very flat architecture. Latency comes from flat architecture. It has a much wider spectrum, that's why. In 5G, we talked about 100 megahertz, 200 megahertz. In 4G, it was like 20, 50 megahertz. So that means the content itself is driving the network to be consumed at a local location. Be it low latency, be it reliability, or be it, broadband in terms of mobility or a fixed broadband. But I think all these three will come together to force a use case on the edge with a private network. Now, use cases are absolutely phenomenal. Alok talked about mining. A mine wherein you have 20 workers, the management cannot go down. There are 50 parameters to be monitored. What kind of gas emission is happening below 100 feet below the ground? You cannot afford to have everybody going down there. So digital twin creation, for example, for a mine on a boardroom will help you out to take many decisions. So there is absolutely no dearth of use cases. But once, as Manish said, very well said, ecosystem has to evolve to do that. ROI, no business can flourish without economics being the right. So when technology is easy to solve. Economics is difficult to solve for us. So I think this entire piece, when stitched together, will have this impetus to take it up.
Sure. Maybe taking this forward to Mr. Ricky. In looking at today's scenario, how do you see, the success for the private networks going forward? Because we spoke on the use cases and the business problem to solve, obviously, and the ROI. At the same time, enterprises are also reeling with the profitability and the margins, and the CIO needs a business case to convince the CFOs. How do you think we can look at this problem?
See, on an ODM perspective, we have a lot of specifications for all this hardware which has come to deploy this 5G networks. So we have ORAN compliance for radios, right? We have Sendo ORAN compliance for CUDU core, all these modules which are there in the private 5G network. Now, monetization can happen if you tailor, right? If you have a tailored solution, tailored private 5G solutions based on the use case that the enterprise is looking for. So that's a way for monetization. So what happens is the number of features implemented, the number of IoT devices implemented, the technology used, right? This will enable us to monetize even further, and innovations has to come. I'll come back to innovations once I come back, right? And that is tailored solutions, right? Tailored solutions can help us monetize this situation, right? Now, innovative pricing is still possible in private 5G. Okay. See, last time, I went to buy a car. I needed an electric car. I was in a mind that it will cost 16 lakhs. but the car cost only 10 lakhs. So I asked, how did you guys do it? And it's there recently in the market. They provided the battery as a service. As simple as that. Network as a service can monetize, can help us perform better ROIs for this thing. Okay, this will be only based on how much they use the network and not on all the front end costing that has come along with the full network. That is a second case where we can bring this thing forward. Then the third thing is, of course, we had mentioned for all the examples which I told before are all based on collaborations. We should have multiple collaborations where they have regulatory agreement between each other so that both parties benefit by deploying tailored solutions. And of course, network slicing, which Jane told, excellent job. I mean, a single network can be sliced to different people, all are SIM authenticated. So network used by, the same network sliced to different people. Each slice won't know what's happening between each other. Security is not compromised in that case. So to have all these things happen, and we need innovation to come in all these sectors. And for that innovations, we need multiple testing and all those things happen, for which we need a spectrum, as James put. We need a spectrum. I mean, all those examples which I told, for example, one was from the US, the coveted CBR's band. Okay, oh, that's like eye candy for everyone. Okay. Then we have N79 band for Korea, which we just recently received. Then this 26 this millimeter, all are subsidized or free or licensed at those countries. So we are reaching that place. We started with manufacturing last year. Now we are going slightly into 6G. We have silicons being made here. PCBs will be fabricated by 2026 as per our roadmap. Roadmap, it's there ahead in India. So we need that environment or that ecosystem to be robust so that we have innovations coming up, so that your think tank starts working. Once competition comes in, you will have strategies like this network as a slice or network as a service and all. So we need that competition to come up, right? So telcos have invested a lot of money, and now government is supporting us to collaborate with telcos. I'm talking from the ODM side, who is manufacturing products for my clients. So this type of associations have already started coming in India, and we are growing at a very fast pace. Okay. We might have started slow, but we are moving at a fast pace. So these are some avenues where we could monetize, private 5G and make it appealable for all these industries to take it forward.
Thank you for the positive outlook. Maybe a last question to Mr. Jain. I think very two important points mentioned were innovation and collaboration. And we have also heard that 5G in a box kind of models, that's what enterprises are looking for. They don't want different shops to come together and build a solution. They need an integrated solution. Is it the way to have an innovative service model or a pricing for the enterprises? So I was saying, okay, is the mic working?
Yeah, could you repeat the
So,
last
yeah.
part, please?
I was saying, Mr. Ricky mentioned two key aspects, innovation and collaboration.
Right.
For the enterprises, it's a key because they are looking for solutions like 5G in a box.
Right.
Okay. And they're also looking for innovative service models, the pricing model.
Right.
Can you throw some light on that? Is that the way to go forward?
See, for all things in India, we are dependent on SST, Sundar Sasta Tikau. That's my, in anything that and everything that you do, that ad which says he's buying a yacht, but he says kitna deti hai, that mindset is drilled into everybody, right? Irrespective. So TCO becomes a fundamental driving factor in everything, and in our industry, we have seen TCO, from 2G onwards, that I've been associated in the industry, we have seen all of that. So here also that mindset prevails. There are technological solutions where you have in the Open RAN and non-Open RAN, you have energy saving features that if you're not using the radio, you can turn down one of the amplifiers or, some time slots and you save energy. When you have hundreds of them across campuses, you do that. Network in a box is one. Network in a radio is also another. You can pack everything in one radio, including the core. Those are also solutions that are coming in. So yes, and fundamentally, innovation is the way forward. Innovation, keeping in mind TCO, is the way that things happen in our country. So, to make it simple, it needs a lot of technology at the right cost point. So that is what, and it's true for, whatever technology we use, whether it's 5G moving forward, whether it's application in enterprises, or if it's for B2C applications, this remains constant. So yeah, we have to, that, and collaboration, of course, we have to, has to be a collaborative effort with the entire ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll open the mic for the audiences if they have any further questions. Maybe a couple of questions from the audiences, please.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ojasvi this side. So basically, I have two questions. First question, especially to Ricky sir, and the second to the entire panel. So, Ricky sir, you talked about how 5G is working and all the improved latency, etc. But you also spoke about how doctors are monitoring their patients remotely through the help of IoT. So how does that work? And the second question, a follow-up to that, to the entire panel is, for example, I am a health organization. Okay, I have a very good established IoT framework. So why would I choose any of you, for example, Ericsson, for example, which provides 5G telecommunication network? So why wouldn't I go with any, big market giant, for example, Airtel, etc., to provide me just 5G communication, because my IoT framework is already in a well-established place. So why would I need a private network which will only increase my cost?
Yeah, good question. So exactly, that's what we are thinking. So as you said, right, it all depends upon the use case, whether you go for a 5G private network or not, right? So if your use case demands only, your IoT framework to happen, right? See, for example, we already told some use cases where the doctor can remotely take a surgery of a patient, and the ultra low latency which is involved there, I'm sorry, it cannot come with a standalone IoT network, maybe, right? So it's dependent on the use case, right? So for certain, so I told you about tailored, sources, tailored private solutions for organizations. So if your use case supports a IoT framework, of course, don't spend money on this. But if your use case involves high latency, higher number of IoT devices, suppose your patients are all over the world and you're monitoring that, right? In those use cases, you would require high latency with higher people, and maybe if you need some security, of course, 5G can support. Otherwise, I told you, if you need only bandwidth and the data can be hacked by anyone or widely available, then you can go for Wi-Fi 6. Right?
Okay, got it. So basically, you're saying that because of the security reasons, a private network
The
could
use
be a better
case.
solution.
The use case,
The
yeah.
use case which I mentioned, the private network could be a better solution because it cannot be, just easily hacked by any external.
No, that's one of the use cases. One of the requirements that you have.
Okay.
So if you collect all the requirements from whichever your client is, and then you tailor that, right? And if you see your IoT meets that latency or meets that number of, IoT devices all interacting together real time with low latency, then you can approach. But now again, right, even if you approach, you have to approach through telcos and all. So for that, we have regulations which are coming up so that that collaboration can be done easily. And not only that, we have protocols coming for you are from the hospital. If you are from the hospital industry,
No, I
or
just put up an example.
put up an example, right? So there are compliances like HIPAA and all coming for hospitals.
Okay.
Example, right? Which will comply to all, unless your product or your whole private 5G network or that solution does not comply to all the specifications in that list, you may not be able to deploy. So so that ensures that you provide a high quality service to the people. And if it's a high quality service, automatically we have many other strategies, money saving strategies, right? Monetization strategies, pricing strategies, which can come in as you scale up.
Okay.
So does that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically I'm not from a medical field exactly. My startup is basically based on deepfakes. Like I'm working on it.
Okay.
So not exactly related to 5G, but yeah, the question was similar. You know, for example, when I build my prototype and it starts networking with people, because our startup doesn't exactly, you know, feed to direct consumers on a mass public. It feeds to government organizations and defense systems. So in that also, I guess for that, private networks would be a better option.
Mission critical defense, okay. You might require, right? I mean, it's based on your use case. So,
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Okay, so I think with this, we conclude the session. Okay.